Welcome to the Short Term Show, the show about short-term rentals and long-term wealth, with real property owners hosting real properties who are crushing it in the vacation and short-term rental space. And here's your host, Avery Carl.
This episode of the Short Term Show has been brought to you by your friendly short-term shop real estate agent. We are hyper-local and totally dedicated to your success. Whether you want to buy your next short-term rental or sell the one you currently own, we would be honored to earn your business. We are in all of the best vacation markets in America. Find us at theshorttermshop.com. That's theshorttermshop.com. Brokered by EXP.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Short Term Show. Today we have a really cool guest. She's doing some really cool stuff with her short-term rentals. So for those of you who are asking yourselves questions or asking the internet questions like how do I host other things besides just overnight rentals at my short-term rental, like events, things like that, Lauren is doing all these things. So I have Lauren Cecil. She's got a super cool property in West Texas, which I love West Texas. And we actually got connected because I trolled someone who posted about Marfa on Instagram. And I was like, man, I think Marfa kind of catfished me because everybody talks about how wonderful Marfa is. And I finally went to Marfa and I found it to be not cool and kind of a dump. So I felt like I was missing something major. It was like, or maybe it was like snipe hunting. But anyway, I love West Texas as a whole, the whole Big Bend. It's a national park, right, Lauren?
It is national park and also Big Bend Ranch State Park as well.
Okay, cool. Listen to me talking about how much I love Texas, and I don't know if it's a national or a state, but it's both. So anyway, guys, I've got Lauren Cecil here. She owns Rio Bravo Ranch in West Texas. How's it going, Lauren?
Great. Thank you, Avery. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm honored to be able to talk a little bit about our business today. I am Lauren Cecil, married to Charlie Cecil, and we have 3 daughters. And our favorite slice of heaven is actually out here in far West Texas, close to Big Bend National Park and Big Bend Ranch State Park. We have Rio Bravo Ranch Campground, Big Bend Jeep, and most recently La Centinela at Rio Bravo Ranch. And I am sort of the manager, director, wearer of all the hats and doing all the things out here for all 3 of those businesses currently and looking to expand.
And guys, I want to add some color. So when we say far West Texas, this is going to be the type of market where there is not really a reason to go there. This is one of those like way out in the middle of nowhere, like it's 5 hours from anything areas. And I've been there several times, always driving from Austin to Los Angeles usually. So this is definitely one of those like real destination markets, I think a lot of people overlook. So I'm really interested to talk about it because there are some really cool things out there. And so first, Lauren, let's talk about the campground. Tell me a little bit about the actual short-term rental piece of what you own there.
Sure. So in 2019, we ended up starting the campground, and that all came because of my husband's grandparents. They retired to this area, the Big Bend region, in 1979. And upon their passing, we realized that since we now had this new property, we needed to have it generate some income. And what better way to do that we're about 5 miles from the northernmost entrance of Big Bend Ranch State Park. It's Texas' largest park, over 300,000 acres. And so Charlie had the idea. He said, well, why don't we do a campground? I said, okay, what does that look like? We don't have electricity. It's off of a dirt road. What are we going to do? And so we started brainstorming, and essentially it's 4 primitive campsites, shade structure, picnic table, grill, that sort of thing, tent site. We do have one 4x4 site. It's a group campsite. And we built an outdoor shower, brought in a porta potty. We call it the Chinati potty because it has amazing views of the Chinati Mountains. And it is actually the cleanest porta potty in Big Bend and has lots of reviews written about just the porta potty. And so that was 2019. So as you can imagine, pandemic hits and people need to be in remote spaces. And Rio Bravo Ranch Campground was one of those remote spaces. And like you say, it is a drive from just about everywhere. And it really took off. We added a firewood locker. So it's kind of like a vending machine for firewood, if you will. So everything happens through me, through HipCamp. And we get the firewood orders taken care of before they even get there. And so they just roll up and are just more than equipped with the information that we provide them to camp out in the desert, because you need to bring in all your water and all your supplies and all of that. So it's a unique guest, because they do have to plan and they do have to kind of know what they're getting themselves into, and they're super respectful of the property. And so I just really, that's where my hosting kind of started, is with the campground and with kind of the camper avatar.
Okay, so you mentioned HipCamp, and I've never used it, but I'm aware of it. And so is that like an Airbnb for campgrounds?
It is. And I would be remiss if I said that I didn't also start out on the Airbnb platform simultaneously, more or less, with HipCamp. HipCamp is essentially just what you said. It's for campers, and you can type in regions or specific locations or amenities that you're looking for in a campground, so that you don't think you're ending up at an RV park and really you get to my campground and you're like, oh, wow, there's an outdoor shower and no electricity. And so it's a great platform. Since then, I'm still on HipCamp, Airbnb, Vrbo, all of that. But then I did eventually create my own website. And so I have another platform, booking software with ResNexus, and it thankfully integrates now with HipCamp, Airbnb, and Vrbo. So I've been really happy with HipCamp and their customer service and support and all of that.
And so you said that they're ordering firewood through HipCamp. So are they just messaging you saying, hey, can you hook me up with firewood, or how does that work?
So they receive, like I said, they receive a lot of information from me. I mean, there's an entire write-up. If you're going to book a campsite at Rio Bravo Ranch Campground, you're going to maybe have a little bit too much information, but then when everything works out for you, you're like, oh, I'm glad I had all that information. Yeah. So I let them know that they can go through my personal website to actually purchase the firewood. So upon receipt, confirmation of their order, I then send them their locker number and combo. And it's literally two metal firewood lockers that my husband and our good friend built. And it's just, combo lock, and you retrieve your firewood. In the beginning, we bought the firewood and hauled it like 7 hours from the campground. We would haul it to the firewood lockers and load it ourselves. Now we have on another part of the property, we thankfully grubbed a lot of mesquite trees. And so we now cut our own and still load it our own. That's where the 3 kids come in really handy, is they take ownership in this as well. They help us load the firewood lockers. So,
okay. So before we get to your luxury short-term rental, I want to hear a little bit more about the campground thing. So the permitting process to get a campground permitted, was that difficult? Because I feel like a lot of people, they say, oh man, land is so cheap in such and such super remote place. I'm just going to buy this and plop down some fire pits and call it a campground. But that's not how it works, right?
No, there's a lot of paperwork, and there's a lot of insurance, and there's a lot of cost that goes into that. So I would recommend doing your homework on that beforehand. I do have that luxury that my husband is heavily involved in this as well. And so we kind of divvy up some of the responsibilities. So some of the legal things and the LLCs and that sort of thing, he has helped out a lot with that. So getting the permits, making sure, and it even drills down into different activities that you're going to allow at your campground. For instance, we don't permit people to, bring their ATV and do any sort of that. So that's a whole nother subset of an activity that you might allow, and we just don't. But then, to have a campfire and to have, bring your animals and all of the ins and outs of that. So it's very detailed as far as the activities that you allow at your campground. It's once you're established, though, it's pretty, straightforward, but there's always some hidden cost or, something to think about. And we like to err on the side of caution as far as the insurance goes, or having someone sign a waiver. Some of the other events that we host at the ranch that do involve the campground property, we've always got an extra waiver for that. So,
yeah. And I think that's really smart to not allow ATVs. And pardon the term here, but I think that a lot of times some city slickers are like, oh, I'm going to get this big property and we're going to have ATVs and stuff. But like, I grew up in a rural area, and it seemed like, once a year, a kid at our school or at the other school in town, like, died, got an arm ripped off, like in the hospital for some serious injury from being idiots on ATVs. So I think that's really smart to not allow that. And I would like to make a PSA to everyone. I think that's a terrible idea, because people really hurt themselves on four-wheelers all the time.
They can make some bad decisions. And since it's a private campground, and so we can allow, we're not the state park, we're not the national park, we're a private campground. So we can allow some things that, you can bring your dogs. There are only certain parts of the state park that your dogs are allowed and things of that nature. And so I do try to find out about the campers, like who's bringing, like once we had a camper bring 2 Russian boar's eye dogs. Okay, well, we shut down the campground for her. Those dogs can be very aggressive. So we let her technically have all 4 sites so that nothing happened, just whatever helps you sleep at night. And yes, not allowing ATVs at the campground definitely helps us sleep at night. Yeah.
Yeah. I made the mistake one time of bringing 2 dogs to a campground in East Tennessee. And this is actually probably the most redneck thing I've ever done. So we went to Bristol, Tennessee for the Bristol NASCAR race. And we brought our 2 dogs, Chainsaw and Whiplash. And I was planning on just hanging. It was on the lake, really pretty. And my husband's a big runner, and Saturdays are his long run days. So he can be running for like 3 or 4 hours. And I thought, oh, well, I'll just zip the dogs up in the tent and sit in this hammock next to the tent and read this book. But Chainsaw, who is a German short hair pointer, he's not, it sounds like he's something crazy, but he's just a little sporting dog. In about 2 minutes, ripped a gigantic hole in the tent. And then I had no way to contain the dogs, because I couldn't even I thought about, well, I could put them in the car and leave the car on with the air conditioner on. I couldn't get in the water because they'll run away, but Luke had the car, had taken it to the town to go run. So for like 3 hours, I'm just sitting here, and the leashes were in the car because he got up at like 5 o'clock in the morning. I was still asleep. And so I'm just sitting here trying to contain these dogs for like 3 hours. And it was one of the worst camping experiences ever. So anyway, that's my bring in the dog story about camping. But okay, last question about the actual campground, which I think everybody is waiting for me to ask, is how much does a campground like this make? Like, how much can you make on a campground where there's not electricity? They have to use a tent. What can you charge for that? What does that look like?
Right. So we did start out pretty low, as with our other business platforms, because we just didn't know. And we wanted to, we didn't want to overpromise and underdeliver. And so I think when we first started, the campsites rented for $20 a night. And the firewood, I think, was similar. It was like $20 a bundle. And that'd get you about two nights of a decent sized campfire. And what we found is that when the state park would fill up, and that's kind of how we viewed ourselves in the beginning, was like overflow. When the state park was booked completely, the campsites, then we got the overflow. And we realized that was happening more times than not, and decided it was worth more the fact that we were cleaning the campground ourselves and, servicing the Chinati potty more often, and hauling the firewood from hundreds of miles away. And so now, it's not like it crept that much. We charge $35 a night, And that's not holiday. Spring break is huge here, and Christmas, Thanksgiving, things of that nature. And so 50 is not unreasonable during those times, but it waxes and wanes. The campground really waxes and wanes. And in the beginning, when it was all we had out here, there was a lot more emphasis to really, that's what we were pushing on social media. That's what we were trying to turn and burn these campers as far as getting them in our campground. And now that I'm spread a little more thin with a couple other businesses, it's holding its own. It's not blowing it out of the water by any means. But originally for our purposes, we just needed to have some income, pay taxes and that sort of thing. And so it definitely did that.
Okay. I'm going to ask about the single family short-term rental in a little bit, but there's a lot of people out there who I think ask themselves in the internet the question like, hey, what can I do to make more money? So you've got, how many acres is this property that you have again? I know you told me.
It's a couple of sections. So it's a little over, it's like 1,100 acres, which out here is not big. Some people may say, oh my goodness, but out here, there are like 60,000 acre ranches. So, but to give you some perspective, it's big enough to be able to spread out the campsites and have a separate house on the same property, but you literally don't know anyone else is there. You feel like you're the only ones.
Okay. Yeah. So that is for most places an extremely big property. And I think there's a lot of people out there who might be in your same scenario where they've got a few property, like a few structures on a big property, and they want to figure out how to use the rest of the land. And you've figured out how to do that. So tell us all of the different events and things that you guys host at this property. I can only imagine that, and I looked at a few pictures, but that it's just really beautiful in person with that desert scenery.
It is quite possibly, at least the house anyway, is the best view in Big Bend, if not in the top 3 views in Big Bend.
Wow.
And it's only become available for the public to see in the last couple of years since we bought the home. But the campground, for instance, so, I mentioned the different avatar for campers. You also get a lot of people who want to do adventure as far as mountain biking and river trips and things of that nature. So we got hooked up with the Texas Tech adventure photography professor, and he brings out his students every March, and they literally have this coolest camera equipment attached to their mountain bikes, and they go and they do, they have the GoPros and all of this, and they do lots of this incredible filming. And so we host them at the campground. So that's and kind of becoming an annual event that they do. And then also, since the property is sprawling and it lends itself to lots of arroyos or valleys, there's peaks and valleys out here, some hills, some mountains. We actually have a run and gun event, which is an obstacle course. We lease it for this event. We lease the property for this event. And highly trained and skilled shooters run about a 10-mile obstacle course, and they are just literally hot and putting their bodies at risk doing this, but it's all very, it's scored on how, their precision, their accuracy, their time, and all of this. And so that's been our biggest event as in terms of people. We have done that 2 years in a row, and we had 100 people, over 100 people this last time. And we were a little concerned with, the impact, the footprint that it leaves on the land. But again, this group is just this avatar of people they're so respectful of the land, and they literally just clean up everything and like the leave no trace. It's a real thing out here, and they adhere to that. So that's been exciting. That's part of what we love. That's a huge part of what we love doing, is bringing people to this area to benefit the town that's closest to us, which is Presidio. And it's about 7 miles from the ranch. You would never know it when you're out here. You feel like you're just by yourself. And so it's the economic impact that it has on the community. that we partner with for all three of these businesses. So those are a couple of events that kind of span the entire ranch. And then we have some other events that are just on the other side, closer to the short-term rental itself.
If you like what you're hearing, if you're picking up what I'm putting down.
So how do you find people who are putting on these events to say, hey, rent my property to do this? Because I think that's people's probably biggest questions is like, how do they find me? How do I make them know I'm here so they can do these things?
Exactly. So if you're getting into the short-term rental space, I think you have to make that decision. Are you someone who's going to form relationships either where you live or where your property is? And I'm that person here. I have, my grandparents didn't retire here, but my husband's did. And when I first started coming here over 20 years ago, I knew no one except his grandparents. Now I just can't even count how many wonderful people I know in this area, but it is because we've reached out and just absorbing all the information you can. Honestly, the run and gun came about because of a relationship that we built with the game warden out here, because that's
always want to be friends with the game warden.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good relationship to have. And so this was born out of that. He, was in the area anyway, and we needed to talk to him about some other permitting. I considered hosting hunts and things of that nature. And, you just kind of have to decide which direction you want to take it. And the relationships you build might actually be what guides you as to which direction you take it. My husband and I both went to Texas Tech, and that's how we hooked up with the Texas Tech adventure photography professor, Jared Foster. And so it's really putting yourself out there, and maybe it could be a passion that you have. Maybe it's just something that you could envision for your property. Out here, the vast, rugged beauty of this land, artists just would be wise to flock, and they do flock here. And so I've just reached out to artists. I'm not an artist, but I'm not afraid to reach out to artists and offer them, an artist residency or a workshop or something like that to kind of get the next thing going. So it's pretty much relationship based, and not being afraid to reach out to someone and have them tell you no. You just move on to the next one.
Okay. So there's something here that, based on everything you just said, that I think you have executed really, really, really well, that a lot of investors get really tripped up on. And that is the remote, the undiscovered short-term rental market. And the thing that I really want to call out about why I think you've been successful, other than, being a good business person and doing things right, is that you started with a place that you or your husband, maybe in this case, since it was his grandparents, knew very well. And I think where a lot of investors make big mistakes is they're like, I got to go find the place that nobody's in yet. I got to go where nobody is. And they start looking at all these lists and they start doing all these things. And then they pick a really random remote place that they've never been to, that they have no familiarity with. And then they have a hard time being successful. And I think if you're going to go that trailblazing route, it has to be somewhere that you're familiar with. And I think that you guys have perfectly executed that. You picked a place that is pretty far from a lot of things. It's not a place that somebody in New York City is necessarily going to know about, or Chicago, but you've been successful with it because you had the familiarity to be able to bring in these events and things to be successful with that. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I couldn't agree more. I think if you're authentic to where you are, where you live, or maybe where you want to live, then it's going to be easier to build those relationships, lay out that business plan rather than, yes, oh, there's a remote location. How are you going to find all your people? You can be a one-man show, a one-woman show. However, you're going to need teams of people to help you when you don't, I don't live here. I don't live, and so I come here as often as I humanly can. But, you've got to build your teams, your cleaning team, your maintenance team, your, just the relationships, and to know if it's a remote location, why are people going there? And
exactly.
Can you deliver what they need? And you have to know what that is, or I can't imagine that it would work that well. But
yeah, and you have to know what it is they're looking for in a stay in that area. So I've seen the town that I'm from, and sorry guys, sorry listeners, I've told this story several times, but the town that I'm from in Mississippi, there's Mississippi State University is there. And it has shown up on several lists of best places to invest in short-term rentals a couple times over the past few years. I'm like, what the hell? Like, why is that showing up on lists? Because Starkville, it can make sense in some cases because, there's not a lot of short-term rentals there. I've talked to the city council before, and they're never going to impose any anti-short-term rental regulations. So there's a lot of room to run there. But where you're going to get tripped up is if you don't have a really good knowledge of the town. It's one of those places where there'll be a really cute pocket that would be totally great for guests. And then there can be some places. Starkville's a pretty big town for like flipping properties because there's a lot of old historic houses and they'll flip them. But everything around it is like not cool for guests. Like they will complain and say they don't feel safe. So you really have to understand the areas and things, and you have to know people. Like you are not going to probably have many rentals in the summer in Starkville because the only people that come there are people coming for university functions, and there's not those in the summer. And so anyway, it's just a second example of like someone who knows an area. Even though if you're going into an area as a new person and there's someone there that's really successful, that could possibly be because they just know that area and know all the people there to be able to do that. So my biggest takeaway from this advice for listeners here is if you're going to start in a market that's not one of the big established ones, make sure you are super familiar with it.
I could not agree more. Could not agree more.
Let's talk about your single family. So it sounds like you might have built that after the campground. Is that right? Or did it come with the inheritance?
No, it actually was a separate property. So when we inherited the land, we had to make a decision to either keep or remove the 1974 trailer home that Grandma and Grandpa Cecil lived in. And so rather than renovate, we decided to remove. And our idea was at the time to draw up plans and build. And in the meantime, we either camped at the campground when we would come to visit, or we would stay in a little room that has no plumbing. So it was essentially camping, glamping. And that was really our motivation with 3 children. That was our motivation. Like, we need to start building yesterday.
I hear that.
And there was a fortuitous chain of events that the neighboring property that has the house La Centinela on it was available for sale. It had only been absentee owners for the past few owners of the home. And my husband thought, I've grown up seeing this house all my life perched on this hill. I'd love to have that someday. Just wasn't for sale. Fortuitous chain of events. And we ended up buying it and not building our plans. We still have those plans, so that is in the works. But it was architecturally designed and built by Earth Space out of Santa Fe. It's an authentic adobe, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, like I say, perched on the top of a hill overlooking the Rio Grande. It's right along FM 170, otherwise known as the River Road, which is a top 10 road in the United States per Condé Nast Traveler and National Geographic. Oh, so wow. Earlier when I said best view in Big Bend.
It's official and official.
I can back it up.
National Geographic.
Come see it. Yeah, National Geographic would not lie to us. So we were able to purchase the property, the house, and we, interestingly, it came fully furnished, but it was not furnished how you would want it for your short-term rental. So we, went through kind of the cleansing process for getting it ready, and we hadn't done anything of that magnitude before. We had a long-term rental back in our early 20s, but we had no experience with short-term rental, so to speak. And so we realized, well, you're in the desert and the air conditioner is kind of reliable. So that's where it all started. So new air conditioner, new roof, new back porch, it's never ending, but it's such a uniquely built home. And with Adobe, it can never be ending. You always have to be maintaining the structural and aesthetics of Adobe. And so it's a labor of love for sure. And so at any stage, even in the beginning, if you read the reviews about it before we did a lot of the work that we've done, it's like, the first word is like, wow. And today, after all these financial decisions to make it even better, the first word is still wow. So you really have to pick and choose what you're going to do. But we knew some of those things couldn't be compromised, air conditioner in the desert and a roof and all that kind of thing. So the views, I think the views are probably the number one for the wow. But it is truly desert luxe. And when I say desert luxe, it's the experience. So like I say, you've traveled all day or you've hiked all day, and you arrive here and this feeling just washes over you of just beauty and luxuriousness. And there's a view from every room in the house. The design of it is just insane. You're taking a shower and you're looking at the Rio Grande. You're lying in one bedroom and you can look out the window of another room and see the mountains of Mexico. It's just pretty incredible. So it's a special, special house. And I've learned a lot along the way as far as, the customer service and what the guest wants. To your point earlier, what do they want when they get here? What are they going to expect? And what do they want that they probably don't even know they need until they get here? And who are they? I learned that along the way too. I just thought, oh, my avatar is going to be all the people that are going to Marfa. They already know about Marfa. They've never heard of us. We've never been around to be heard of. And so that's what I'm going to get. They're going to go look at art in Marfa and they're going to come to my house. Well, that's not who started coming at all. It was typically in the beginning, it was like a lot of retirees that had multiple days to just come and stay and relax. And I kept trying to kind of push for that. Like, I want the younger person. Well, my wish came true and I got a younger group that, had a party. So I was like, okay, never mind. I think I'll switch back and just let the guest choose us. And it has worked out really well that the guest has chosen us. And we love to bring our friends here. And we love to kind of establish a friendship, if you will, of sorts with our guests. I like to find out what they're looking for and then anticipate what they might need while they're here and just add those special touches, the amenities. In the desert, when you've got 4 different options for making your coffee in the morning, it just feels different. It's just kind of a next level stay, if you will. And then with the views and with the huge porch, there's a 1,000 square foot porch on the back of this home. And that's kind of where the event planning started. The seed was planted for that. Like, how many people could we comfortably fit back here to do things that we love? We love Songwriters Festival and music and things of that nature. So we started the Songwriters Festival and parties and dinners and most recently weddings. So it's still evolving.
That's so cool that you're finding so many ways to get these property or the properties, technically one property, I guess, but different sites on the property and different things about the property booked?
It's kind of, out here. So summertime, you mentioned earlier, you were talking about, okay, things aren't going to happen in the summer. Well, out here, it's 116 degrees. So unless you're going to come out here and just hang out at the house, which people do that, they have all these grand plans of going hiking, and then they literally just message me and say, we just had the best time just sitting on the porch from, sun up to sundown. I'm like, I get it. That's great. I'm glad y'all had a good time. But that said, summer is my slow time. And so I was thinking, well, what are some supplemental ways to generate more revenue while, to compensate for that slow time. And turns out I love event planning. And if you're going to run your own business, I do these 3 businesses full time. So if you're going to do that, you might as well be doing something that you love. And turns out I love event planning. And again, that's where the relationships with the people in the region have come into play. And then they get to come and showcase their craft, whether it's photography or catering or, just lots of different vendors and people of the community. And so, yeah, I'm still just brainstorming. What else could we do here that eventually, I'm not going to, you got to have a plan for the future as far as, well, how thin can I be spread and what's the most bang for your buck? And so is it going to be, how many events per year versus how many times renting the house out, per year? So I wouldn't ever want to shift completely to events because I just absolutely love the hospitality part of the guests and just knowing that they, that we get to share it.
So tell me about the Jeep rental, because that's pretty cool too. You're just doing all the things.
Yeah. So the Jeep rental, the Big Bend Jeep, was kind of born after the campground. We have some friends in the area that are park rangers, and they would always say, oh my gosh, we had these people come in and they wanted to go see the state park, and they're in their Prius and they didn't get to see everything they wanted to see because there's either 4x4 trails or they didn't want to get the paint scratched on their car, the pinstripes. And so we personally, as a family, have always loved to rent Jeeps if we go to Colorado or wherever. And we're like, what, this is a need that's not being filled. At the time, there weren't Jeep rental companies. They had kind of gone out of business. And so we said, let's get a Jeep and see what happens. And so we rented the Jeep out of Presidio. I formed a relationship again with a local body shop owner. I thought, okay, well, this, you kind of have to figure out like what, you couldn't leave the Jeep at a florist in town. Like what makes sense? The body shop owner made sense to have the Jeep rented out of there because he could do all the maintenance and the car wash and rotate and balance the tires. And so the Jeep rental business went pretty good. There's an airport a couple of miles down from his shop. So I offered airport service there. And what I noticed though was I would, my phone number was on the website. At the time I had the website and everything for the Jeep. And a lot of the calls were coming out of Terlingua, which is closer to the national park, which the visitorship is bigger there. And so I thought, okay, we're either going to take this Jeep and move it to Terlingua, but I couldn't do it. And so we bought another Jeep. And so we had one in Presidio and one in Terlingua, and the one in Terlingua just took off. And so we made the decision, okay, we're going to move the other Jeep there. So now both Jeeps are in Terlingua at Wright Hardware Store. So it worked out good. Again, they're 5 minutes from the closest auto repair if we ever need, oil changes, things of that nature. And their hours were the same as the Jeep rental. So if you do a day's Jeep rental, it's 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. They also rent U-Hauls. So they were already familiar with the process. And I look at my Jeep renters as I do the short-term rental. I kind of just you're supposed to just focus on the one thing, right? Okay, so that's how I stay sane. I have these different businesses going, but if I can just look at it all like they're short-term rental guests, they may be renting a tent site or a Jeep or the house, then I can treat them like a short-term rental guest. So they get tons of information about the area once they book. I learned that early on too. I would just get on the phone with people and, oh, you need to do this trail and that trail or whatever. And then they wouldn't book the Jeep. And so I'm like, okay, upon booking, I will provide you more than anything you ever wanted to know. Since then, there are some other Jeep rental companies in the area, but I've just maintained the quality and the customer service and offering, again, kind of a desert luxe product. So my Jeeps are all, they've got the lift kits and big tires, and we kind of souped them up a little bit. It's more than enough for what you need to be in the national park or Big Bend Ranch State Park. So love those guests too. And it's just been picking up more and more. Again, I think it's important to reach out and collaborate. I was a little skeptical moving into the Terlingua market because I knew my market here closer to Presidio in the state park. And that was kind of an unknown. But just going there and reaching out to people, Chamber of Commerce, that kind of thing. And now I have relationships pretty much from end to end of Big Bend. So if people need recommendations, then I can just pick up the phone and call for them and provide them with what they need so that when they show up, they just get in the Jeep and it's a seamless process. We take care of all the reservation logistics ahead of time. So they're able to reach me, email, phone, internet, and I provide what documentation I'll need ahead of time. And so that's all taken care of, and they show up and they get the key to the Jeep. And it's been great. It's picked up huge. I mean, just reaching out to, that's one of the things like, oh, I want do I want an influencer, or who do I want in this Jeep, or who do I want to kind of help me promote this? And it turns out if you're operating a certain way, people will find you as well. And they'll say, hey, can I go out in your Jeep and photograph this, that, and the other, and, provide you with photos? And I say, yeah, and you get a little discount on the Jeep. That's great. So it's a great collaboration. I always try to cross promote as well. So if I've got a camper, I like to find out what they're doing. And if I think that the Jeep might be a good fit, something, an add-on or a premium that they might want, I recommend that they rent the Jeep. If they're in the Jeep, and I'd say, if I get to talk to them on the phone, hey, where are you staying? Or I give them the welcome email, and the link to my short-term rental is in the welcome email for the Jeep. So I've had people say, some retirees, oh, we can stay 4 more days. Yes, we'll book your house. And so then they're driving your Jeep to your house and maybe they need firewood for the campfire. And so then I direct them to buy the firewood at our campground. So it's really creating the whole experience. And I think that's key if you're going to do this in a remote location, that you have that luxury. You have that responsibility to create that for the guest, in my mind, but you also have the luxury because they may have never been here before, and it can be quite daunting to try to plan all that yourself. So I like to help them plan it. And it just so happens that I offer a lot of things that they may want to do.
Well, that's awesome. You really are using every resource available to you and creating the right relationships so that your place can be successful. So that's really awesome. And we are coming to the last few questions of the show, running out of time. And we ask all guests these questions. So the first one is, what advice would you give 20-year-old Lauren?
So first and foremost, I wish that I could have told myself to get my real estate license because I would like to be able to be more in the know, looking at deals, looking at property, knowing what's available, knowing what's hit the market. Charlie and I love doing that. We have seen a lot of properties and we have made a lot of offers and we've had a lot of rejections. But we feel like that the right one is around the corner. And I guess that's what I would also tell my 20-year-old self, is that it could just be right around the corner. You just have to put in the effort. And in your 20s, I don't think it's realistic to say you should just devote your whole time to real estate investing. I mean, if I could have just told myself, hey, take one less day a week to hang out with friends or go to the bar or watch a movie, and go look for deals instead. Go get a property. Time is on your side when you're in your 20s. So I would have definitely loved to have told myself that. I think time is still on our side, but we're not 20.
I hear that. All right. So second question, what advice would you give a new short-term rental owner or new short-term rental investor, who wants to get started today?
Sure. I would say, based on our experience, I would say quality over quantity. And I realize that some people may be in a position to do quantity, and that's wonderful. We, talk about that all the time. We would love to buy more and to have more. But like you said, I'm trying to just basically squeeze out and cross promote with what I have going. And it'll be wonderful to get more properties. But I think so often people think, oh, I need to scale quick. And that's amazing. The people that have done that, that's truly amazing and impressive. But if you're just getting started, don't let it be intimidating that you have to scale quickly. Just get a quality property and make it a quality experience, and you will benefit from it.
Very good advice. And last question, what is your favorite book that has impacted your mindset?
So most recently, it's the new gold standard. Joseph Michelli, who wrote the Starbucks Experience, did this book with the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company. So mindset, day in and day out, mindset is everything if you're in the short-term rental space. And providing that top quality, luxurious experience, I have started to transform in my own mind. I don't have to transform anyone else's mind to think that we're the Ritz-Carlton of Big Bend. But if I wake up every day and that's how I operate, then we're only winning with that mindset. And so it's really, breaks it down into 5 principles. It's easy to understand, and you can get more excited about some of the principles than others. But they're all relative to the short-term rental space, offering the wow factor, putting the guest first, leading a team. That's a whole nother podcast. And we've done those, all your teams of people. So just leadership, really choosing people, not just like, oh, you interviewed for this position, but really like getting someone you can trust and someone that can trust you as a leader, and viewing, I have 1 property, 2 Jeeps and 4 campsites. So when you say it like that, it's like, oh, okay, that's a cute little portfolio, but it is a niche, and it's boutique, and it's desert luxe, and it's going to be the Ritz-Carlton of Big Bend. So great book.
And guys, it really is. We're going to put a link to this property in the show notes. It really is an amazing view. So definitely check that out. Maybe go stay there. And Lauren, thank you so much for coming on. And if any of our listeners want to find your properties to potentially book your Jeeps or anything like that, how can they do that?
Sure. So we're listed at HipCamp, Airbnb, Vrbo, and the Jeep business, Big Bend Jeep, is bigbendjeep.com. And La Centinela at Rio Bravo Ranch, which is the short-term rental, is Rio Bravo Ranch TX.com. Also Instagram, Rio Bravo Ranch TX, and Facebook as well.
All right. Well, Lauren, this was a really interesting episode, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Avery.